Chrysler's turning 100, 100 years of people-first innovations, from inventing the first plug-in hybrid minivan with stow-and-go seating to reimagining what's next with the Halcyon concept. Chrysler has always put people at the center. Here's to the last century of innovation and the next century to come.
Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the first week in June 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. We're breaking down some of the biggest stories in the auto industry from the past week and looking forward to what's in store in the days ahead. Today on the show, between a public war of words with his former buddy Elon Musk and a standoff with automakers over tariffs and pricing, President Trump has been making automotive headlines all week. Our own Omari Gardner joins the show to talk about it.
As Tesla tries to expand its mission, that certainly will not help.
That's coming up in a few minutes. But first, Jamie, how's your week been?
I'm hanging in there, Cal. How about you?
Oh, it's been interesting, especially reading my tweets on Twitter. You ready to get into some news?
Sure thing.
All right. So, Jamie, what are your thoughts on May U.S. sales? Now, the numbers weren't as strong as April and March. Do you think we'll continue to see sales decline through the rest of the summer?
Yeah, as long as the tariffs remain in place. Of course, some of that's uncertain. We don't know, the general so-called reciprocal tariffs are still being debated in the appeals court. We may find out about that next week, and then it probably would be appealed to the Supreme Court. But as long as these auto tariffs stay in place, the automakers and dealers are going to be under more and more pressure to raise prices, which will deter more customers. There'll just be fewer people who can afford a new vehicle. So it looks challenging for the near term. March and April were really good months, and we'll see how the year ends up, but the trend for the immediate future looks challenging.
And let's say, hypothetically, the appeal from the tariffs go through, and we end up having the reciprocal tariffs. Will it turn it back into possibly COVID times where we'll see, short supply?
We'll see. It's not as perilous as it had looked earlier with all the tariffs stacked on top of each other, the metals tariffs, on the auto tariffs, on the, fentanyl and migrant-related tariffs. So, suppliers may be able to make it through, but there's still a significant risk with all these extra taxes along the way throughout the value chain that some of these smaller suppliers might not have the cash to have the working capital to keep functioning. And then you start seeing, one company's failure cascading throughout the chain and shutting down plants for bigger suppliers and automakers.
Well, and speaking of suppliers, U.S. suppliers call for immediate action on China rare earth restrictions. What specific measures can the U.S. take to secure rare earth supplies?
We talk a lot about how the auto industry has long lead times. I mean, mining has really long lead times. If we're talking half a decade for autos, it's a decade or more. To open up a new mine or even a refining facility is just really challenging. I know there are some startups trying to get busy with recycling rare earth magnets, and because they're going to be so necessary, we don't want those things going, into a landfill or whatever. We don't have nearly enough stuff ready to be recycled, to make up for the imports from China. It's just the hugest source of these minerals that help power so many things in the modern economy. It's a little ironic, China appeared to have put these limits on in response to U.S. tariffs, but they're really affecting, not only the U.S., but, Europe. Auto plants are shutting down there. I think, the rest of Asia is already struggling to not have enough of the rare earth magnets. So hopefully the U.S. and China can reach a deal and find some peace soon.
And finally, Mazda will build its first dedicated EV starting in 2027. Would it make more sense for the company to stick to their hybrid plan, especially with low interest in EVs?
Yeah, it's tough. Hybrids are certainly a bigger and more robust growing segment right now. But eventually, I mean, they're going to need an EV or more EVs. And so getting started in 2027, they'll be late to the party, but there will have been many years that they weren't losing money on EVs. And maybe by the late 20s, especially working with their partner Toyota. Maybe they can get solid state batteries or just, lean into efficiencies that Toyota has achieved and be able to, not take as deep a losses on their early EVs as most automakers do, try to ramp up quickly and get profitable.
Well, we did report earlier this week that there was a survey, EV interest is the lowest it's been in years, but it sounds like you need to have at least one in the portfolio, correct?
Yeah, for the long term. I mean, it really seems to be where the market's going. As Mary Barra has said, there's simply better vehicles. The challenge is the price, but presumably, the technology is going to keep getting better. There's a lot of money being invested in developing batteries, in manufacturing batteries. So hopefully, costs start to come down and then people get, a cleaner, faster, easier to drive, easier to care for, easier to maintain car. That's going to be where things are going. But Mazda, is a small company and they have limited resources and really have to pick their battles.
Good stuff, Jamie. Coming up, Automotive News Director of Content and Commentary, Omari Gardner, joins the show to talk all things Trump and autos. That's next on Weekend Drive.
The 2025 Automotive Golf Classic is coming up soon, raising funds for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Southeastern Michigan. Players will tee off Monday, June 16th at St. John's Resort in Plymouth, Michigan.
Attendees will get exclusive access to the third annual Automotive News Supplier Panel discussion just prior to tee time at 9 a.m. This year's remarks will feature Paul Thomas, President of Bosch North America, along with Colin Shaw, President of MEMA Original Equipment Suppliers. The executive guests will discuss challenges for suppliers stemming from the current trade landscape, new U.S. tariffs, and other critical issues facing the supply chain.
For more information about this event, reach out to Tiffany Sula at the Boys and Girls Clubs at tsula@bgcsm.org or to Philip Nussel, AGC Executive Chairman at pnussel@crane.com.
Chrysler's turning 100. That's a whole century of shaping the way America drives and leading with innovation. Did you know Chrysler introduced the first ignition key? What about the first automatic transmission, the first Hemi V8 engine, the first windshield wipers, and the first ever minivan? And they never stopped innovating, even today. The Chrysler Pacifica is the first and only plug-in hybrid minivan, the first with the convenience of stow-and-go seating, and it's packed with the most high-tech safety features in its segment. But for Chrysler, it's about more than just innovating. It's about innovating for people, for memories, road trips with your friends, school drop-offs in the rain, family reunions, weekend soccer tournaments, first dates, first drives, and everything in between. Chrysler's been there for all of it, leading the way with game-changing ideas. And they've introduced the Halcyon concept, driving the brand's future innovation, focusing on building a sleek, smart, sustainable vehicle design for the next generation of driver. So here's to Chrysler, 100 years of innovation, memories, and everything in between.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. Unless you were stranded without internet service for the last 48 hours, you probably couldn't avoid the fallout from President Trump's online war of words with Tesla CEO Elon Musk. But behind the headlines and social media theatrics, there are deeper questions about political influence, EV policy, and the future of the auto industry. Omari Gardner is Director of Content and Commentary here at Automotive News. He joins me now at our offices in Detroit to talk about all of it. Omari Gardner, welcome back to Weekend Drive.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Well, sometimes I try to avoid talking about the president. Yeah, I get less, angry letters from readers and stuff, the more we can just, just talk about business. But sometimes the president is a big part of the auto industry.
Yeah, his influence and reach are undeniable.
Yeah, and this past week especially, it's been a big week for the president. Obviously, he's very busy. He's doing a lot of stuff, but doing a lot of things in the auto industry. One of the things sort of tangentially, in the president's wheelhouse is how his tariffs, his auto tariffs and general tariffs, we'll get to the general tariffs in a bit, but the auto tariffs in particular, are adding costs to selling wholesale vehicles to dealers, and how the automakers and the dealers work through, raising prices when they have these, they could raise prices and say, hey, it's the tariff's fault, but they're really worried about doing it because they don't want to be like Walmart or Elon Musk and get in a battle with the president and have him start yelling about him.
Yeah, I mean, he has a bullhorn on on Twitter to, to scold them whenever he sees fit. But automakers have tried to hold out on their pricing, but they've had to, pull over here, pull over there, and sometimes it comes in the form of decontenting, sometimes it comes in the form of minimal price increases, but a lot of them have tried to hold out, but eventually they can't do that in perpetuity.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing, even when they don't raise prices, we're seeing prices go up just because the incentives are coming down.
Yep.
You don't need to discount vehicles when they're in scarce supply. Inventories come down, and so it's gotten tougher for the consumer.
Yeah. We saw that during COVID, maybe not to the extent quite yet, but it's just economics 101. It's supply and demand.
Well, the other part about the automakers taking increases that are much lower, raising prices much less than their costs are going up, I think a lot of them are still hoping that the tariffs will go away, that there'll be some negotiations. I think the Korean and Japanese automakers, for sure. Obviously, just within North America, there's a hope that at some point these tariffs can go away and things can be free trade again.
Yeah, and I'm sure that on the manufacturers and the dealers don't want their customers to see prices increase at such a rate that it causes them to just panic and completely get out of the market. I mean, we've already seen some signs that sales are slowing because with these price increases, prices were already at a point where a lot of consumers are priced out of the market. And if they saw, prices that increase, say, 10%, that certainly would put sales on ice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely don't want to give up market share, don't want to scare away the customers.
Yeah.
A lot of reasons of course, you want to raise prices as quietly as possible,
Mm-hmm.
cut them loudly, but it's a real tightrope that they're walking.
Yeah.
One of the other things, I mean, we mentioned tariffs. We talked about the autos tariffs, and but also there's the metals tariffs, right? That's what we call it, moving the metal.
Yeah.
And these cars are made with a lot of aluminum and steel.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that that automakers and eventually retailers will have to worry about with the doubling of tariffs from 25 to 50% for those metals. And while it might not affect the price of the car, the entirety of the car, it certainly is going to have an impact. There is plenty of steel produced in this nation, but maybe not quite as much aluminum. And with automakers figuring trying to lightweight their vehicles, that could make a dramatic impact.
Yeah, we get a lot from Canada, both aluminum and steel. And it seems like everything I've read, I mean, the steel capacity is pretty maxed out. So it's not like they can just make more. It really just means prices will be higher.
Right.
And that's not helpful to this industry.
No, not at all. No, not when they're contending with other tariff increases.
So the auto tariffs and the metals tariffs, those seem to be solid, that at least certainly within the president's control. He lost a court battle over the reciprocal tariffs, the so-called reciprocal tariffs. Yeah. The executive branch, the president can't just declare those. Those have to be done by Congress.
Right.
He's appealed, and I guess we might see the results of that as soon as next week. I think June 9th is the deadline for the administration to make their argument for why they should be able to do this.
Yeah, and the courts will sort it out. But in the meantime, once again, the automakers are left in a holding pattern while policy gets adjudicated in the court system.
Yeah, more uncertainty for the automakers. And hey, all those tariffs stay in place during the appeal.
Yeah.
So it's another week where you might think, oh, maybe hold back a shipment to try to hope that it'll be less taxed next week. But that you don't want to, if you're running just-in-time inventory, you can't hold things back or you lose the whole plant.
Yeah, I don't envy the people who have to monitor those tariffs and adjust the cost, and the other cost accountants have to really stay on their toes.
I would say these are super important for the auto industry in two ways. One is that there are a lot of auto parts that aren't listed under the auto parts tariffs, just regular little motors and actuators and mirrors and things that aren't labeled as automotive parts. So if these tariffs don't exist, or if these tariffs aren't allowed, that's a huge break for the manufacturers. And then, but conversely, if they are allowed, it's another cost burden. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is the pressure that it puts on the economy overall, right? If everything that's imported into the US is taxed at 10% or more, it's going to make consumers weaker.
Yep.
It is going to zap their buying power, and they're going to have less money to buy cars.
Right. I mean, because we're an auto industry news source, but the one thing that may get lost in sort of the talk is that there are other pressures that consumers bear. On top of that, rents are not rising slowly. Interest rates are still relatively high compared to what we've experienced in the past few years. And so you have, food costs more, homes cost more, or rent. Consumer products, things that people need every day, cost more. There's going to be less money to purchase vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The risk of slowing the economy, really harming the economy, is a concern for any economic participant, but especially within the auto industry.
Right.
While we're talking about tariffs, I want to make sure that all of our audience knows we've got a really great resource page for them online. It's at autonews.com/tariff resource. You can find all the facts on, where the tariffs stand, what each automaker has done or announced in response to the tariffs. A lot of good facts in there for folks.
Yep. And if you want a quick, easy video to watch on our social channels on Facebook and Instagram, and I believe LinkedIn, we also will have a video for you that is posting, I believe, on Friday. And I guess by the time you hear this, it will have posted.
That will have posted yesterday. Yeah.
Yes. So that's another way you can find out our resource guide and then go online to take a look at it.
Well, and again, for people who like videos, we still have up our Congress Conversation live stream from this past week. We talked with a trade lawyer and a supplier lobbyist. So a lot of good perspectives there. That's on Congress Conversation. You can find it on LinkedIn. You can find it on my LinkedIn page if you want to just look there, or on Automotive News. The last thing we have to touch on, the way this week ended for the president facing the auto industry. He got into quite a feud with the world's richest man, the primary owner and the CEO of the most valuable automaker on the planet. Of course, Tesla CEO Elon Musk.
Yeah, it's social media soap opera, to say the least. They've taken some pretty nasty jabs at each other. But the one thing to keep in mind is that while this may be entertaining or not so entertaining for some folks, there are serious material things going on with the administration, with the potential to kill emissions mandates or reduce emissions mandates, to kill the EV incentive, and to roll back, which has been a big source of Tesla's income over the years, the EV or the emissions credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Elon Musk likes to characterize himself as a libertarian, someone who, hey, just let everybody be free and do what they want to do. But he has certainly used the tools of government, both in California and federally, to use those goals to try to lower emissions. Those create systems that have allowed billions of dollars to flow into his company and really helped keep it alive in all those money losing years before it made its first profit. And even when it made its first profits, they wouldn't have been profitable without also having the credit money.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly has been their lifeline, right? You could argue that Tesla wouldn't have survived without it. And now, and I'm sure it's still a significant part of their profitability,
Mhm.
which they'll plow into expanding its manufacturing footprint and its software R&D and their other R&D operations. If Tesla loses that, now that they're on a greater global scale, they probably can withstand it, but certainly that stream of income will dry up, and it's not insignificant.
Yeah. I mean, it's billions of dollars. And when you're trying to create a humanoid robot industry, when you're trying to create a robotaxi and trying to take on Waymo in the robotaxi battle, every billion counts.
Yeah. As Tesla tries to expand its mission, it certainly will not help.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye on it. Of course, we focus on the automotive elements of Mr. Musk's wildlife and as well as Mr. Trump's presidency. And we'll be keeping track of all of that. Of course, appreciate you being here, Omari. Omari Gardner is our director of content and commentary here at Automotive News. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks for having me.
That's all for this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on government regulation, sales results, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back on Monday for a conversation with MIT research scientist Brian Reamer, who says quantifying driver distraction rates is more complicated than some studies have suggested.
At the end of the day, there's a lot of pros and cons to what we're doing in the car. And it's not so simple to dissect what's good, what's bad, and how non-driving related tasks are being juggled by drivers out there today.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. If you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.